now the final segment of the podcast. I call it Beneath the Accent. I'm going to ask a couple of
Okay.
questions. You can answer them in one word or a sentence or however you feel like. The idea is
Okay.
just to know more about Simran. So,
Okay.
ready?
Absolutely.
First is, what advice would you give to your younger self and at what age?
Be authentic, trust the process at, I would say, age 18, 19.
Okay. What's that one dish from your home country that always brings you comfort and nostalgia?
Ooh. Okay, so since I told you that my mom is from Bihar, that's where she grew up. Um,
Hmm.
I've grown up on a lot of Bihari food. It has to be boiled rice with yellow dal,
Hmm.
um, and then maybe some. Uh, it's called aloo chokha, which is basically mashed potatoes on the side.
Okay.
So that's gonna probably be it. Yeah.
Okay. Awesome. Making me hungry already. Okay. Describe a moment when you experienced a significant cultural difference that surprised you.
Interesting. I think this was probably the first time that I was invited to one of my white friends' house for
Hmm.
Thanksgiving, and just kind of like seeing that dynamic within their family,
Hmm.
um, and how everybody kind of went about that interpersonal relationship. And this was me at 18, probably. Um,
Hmm.
that to me was. That to me just kind of made me think about the way that we do that in a lot of Southeast Asian cultures, and
Yeah.
it's really like I think both of those are really warm, but there was a bit of a difference there, so that's something that came to mind.
Do you have any instance, any funny story related to your misunderstanding around the accent or English?
So my name is Simranzeet, Simranzeet with a Z, but I go by Simran. That's what I go by in conversations. So a lot of times I've heard different variations of Simran from people. I've heard Simran, I've heard Simran,
Yeah.
I've heard different kind of like mispronunciations. Like for the longest time, um, Starbucks used to mess up the name that they used to put on the cups, and then probably there were enough Simrans who came in the downtown Toronto core that they finally were able to
End up
figure it
learning.
out. But I've heard so many different variations of this name. It's not even funny, and it's also funny that a lot of times I think Microsoft Outlook or Microsoft Word um, autocorrect Simran to Simon. So there have been many
Okay.
emails in which it's been, "Hey Simon," and I'm like, man, this is not even like ask Simon to finish this job for you. This was not meant for me. But yeah, that's that's something that came to mind.
Okay. For me, the spellings are always correct. It's always a pronunciation which goes from Gurasis to Gurasses, Guraces, Jurasses. So that's where my pronunciation goes to. Okay. Tell us about your first friend that you made in Canada. And are you still in Connect?
Oh, that's so beautiful. So that's such a beautiful question. Yes, the first friend that I did make in Canada was this friend from Chandigarh, actually, who
Hmm.
who happened to be a fellow international student who I had met. So universities, I think they still do. They have these international student centers uh, in universities. So I think there was like a welcome night for international students that this place in Windsor was organizing, and I met my friend. His name is Rohan Khanna. I met him
Hmm.
there, and yeah, we're still in touch. We lost touch for a couple of years. I think from 2015 to 2018, 2019, but
Hmm.
then we reconnected back in 2020, and then we've been in touch. So shout out to Rohan. He's in India vacationing right now. Um,
Okay.
but yeah, we were still in
Mm.
touch.
Okay. Awesome. What's that one tradition that you have adopted, like a Canadian tradition that you have adopted?
It's gonna probably be opening conversations up with asking about the weather. Uh,
I love
it's
that answer.
just because I think it's something that I was just mentioning this to someone back home. I think it was my parents or somebody else. But how in India, we never really check the weather. We don't talk about the weather that much. It just
Yeah.
is what it is, and we just kind of take it
Yeah.
at face value. You just like get accustomed to it. But I think it is such a thing here in Canada, and I think rightfully so, because the weather here changes so quickly that everybody's always on their phone looking at what the latest prediction is. And I think it just ends up finding its way into conversations as well. So yeah, it's
Yeah.
gonna be opening up conversations by talking about or just publicly musing about the weather.
Yeah, I just realized I do that a lot too. I do ask a lot about the weather. And I think if the amount of times I've asked Siri that what's the weather outside,
Right,
I
right.
think if she could really be a human, she would snap at me that stop asking about the weather every single day.
I know, right?
Yeah.
Crazy.
Oh my God. Okay. Um, what's something that you ate for the first time in Canada?
It has to be the turkey dinner at
Hmm.
Thanksgiving. So, you know, the place that used to kind of have like the food court at the university um, did the special thing, um, Thanksgiving 2011,
Hmm.
in which they kind of served the turkey, they served the potatoes, the stuffing, and everything with the
Hmm.
cranberry
Yes.
sauce. And that to me was just like, wow. It was like a net new kind of
Yeah.
food experience, and something that I actually took quite a liking to. So that was the
Hmm.
first time that I ate that in Canada.
Hmm. I actually tried that 2 years ago for the first time, and I thoroughly enjoyed it too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
If you had to describe yourself as an animal or any creature, what would it be and why?
There are so many that come to mind, but I probably am going to go with an eagle or a hawk.
Hmm.
Um, that's the one that I identify with the most right now, like in the stage of my life, in which there's still a bit of that independence.
Hmm.
If like going about life and living it, on my own terms.
On my terms, yeah.
Um, Also being very authentic, and really looking at things from perspective. Um, and Yeah, a bit of that kind of like going with the flow, because eagles and hawks, they don't really flap their wings too much. A lot of it is just trusting the process and uh, seeing where the wind takes them and just course correcting along the way. So I'm going to say probably that, yeah, eagle or
Yeah.
hawk.
I love that. Okay. If you had to create one law that everybody has to follow, what would it be?
In Canada, or like
In
just
general,
generally
any law
in
for
general?
the world.
Genuinely speaking, uh, making some part of your week mandatory for community service,
Hmm.
100%. Just because I think it's going to get a lot of people out of their homes and interacting with people that they generally don't interact with.
Hmm.
So a lot of that, cultural knowledge
Hmm.
exchange that happens. I genuinely believe that like doing something for others without expecting anything in return is one of the ways to genuinely experience that joy. That if you've
Hmm.
not done it, you won't really know what I'm talking about. But if you've done it, it's a different kind of an experience, and I think everyone
Hmm.
deserves to feel that at least once in their life. And I think third is, it also will, I think, hopefully, it might be hard for people because it's a law that they need to follow, but eventually it might just become a force of habit. But just paying it forward, you know.
Hmm.
Uh, and I think I very strongly believe that only if we could, um, you know, have more people to people interactions within the community, in which I'm meeting people who have a very different viewpoint than myself, and I'm meeting them over, I don't know, like a street cleanup, let's say.
Hmm.
um, Conversations are meant to happen, bridges are meant to be built. I just think it's gonna, at the very least, you know make us better as a society. So I'm gonna probably say, yeah, mandatory community service in some way, shape, or form on a weekly or a monthly basis.
Yeah. Okay. Amazing. Finally, describe Canada in one word or a sentence.
Home is what I'm
Hmm.
going to go with. Um,
Okay.
and The reason why I say that, and this has been, again, something that I remember from the first time that I came back from my first vacation to India, and that has stayed with me, is, and that's um, why I've come to love this country so much. because this country has helped me find my own self. Um, and it's also really provided me with those connections, those people. Um, it really embodies that ethos of
Hmm.
doing something for others and being kind, right? So the reason why I said home is because, um, and this is something that I've loved every single time that I've come back from a foreign country into Canada. That whenever the CBSF officer takes your passport and they do everything, you could be a student, you could be on a visitor visa, you could be a permanent
Yeah.
resident or a citizen. They say welcome home,
Welcome home. Yeah, absolutely.
and that is so it's really warm. It really like talks about what Canada is all about, which is it's welcoming, um, and it really is it's kind in the way that it sees people kind of coming in and adding to the vibrancy of the culture and the economy. So yeah, Canada's home, man.
Okay.
Yeah,
So, Simran, if you could leave me with one piece of advice, what would it be?
I'd probably say it's 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 great that you've started this community through my thick accent podcasts and your listeners tune in. My advice to you will be to not give up on storytelling in any way, shape, or form, right? It could be through a podcast today, it could be through other means and avenues,
Hmm.
next week, next months, coming years as you get more busy. Never stop telling stories. Um, because I think you personally, I think, having interacted with you over the course of this podcast and previously as well, I think you have a real um, talent with telling stories, shaping stories. Um, and For somebody out there who might not really have the access to come and meet people like you and me,
Hmm.
it's easy for them to tune into the podcast and be a part of our lives and share and get a sliced version of our lives and get to experience it vicariously. And I think that's really powerful. That's really
Hmm.
something that can really help move the needle if people can understand that the experiences that I'm having as an immigrant, Simran and Gurasis and other people who've been on the podcast have had similar experiences. I think that validation goes a long way in terms of giving them that bit of confidence, that self belief. So I think you're doing a terrific job in terms of telling these stories. And my advice will be that never stop telling stories. Just make sure that if you've been chosen, um, if you have chosen this path for yourself to tell these stories, just make sure that it always remains a part of what you do, um, because you don't know who you might be influencing in what way. um, and Yeah, that's gonna probably be it. Yeah.
Wow, I think once again, I'm so impressed the way you articulate your thoughts, Simran. But thank you. Thank you for all your kind words. I really appreciate that. And finally, tell me, how would you describe your experience of being on this podcast?
Oh, it was amazing, Gurasis. You've been a very gracious host. You made me think about. Um, you kind of made me introspect and go back and think about things. What I was like growing up in India, and then when I moved here, and it just refreshed and jogged my memory. Um, I think you also went into like certain areas. You kind of like delved into certain areas which I don't think a lot of hosts or a lot of question like interviewers go into.
Hmm.
um, and For me, the highlight was that it was a very human conversation, right?
Hmm.
It was a conversation which was definitely about my experience and what kind of my trials and tribulations were, what my successes were, etc., etc. But was also about you. I really like the way that you drew out pieces about different pieces about how I thought about things or how you summarize that towards the end. So it's been fantastic. And again, kudos to you for doing this and doing this for the community.
Well, thank you. Thank you for being on the podcast and adding value to my listeners. And thank you for being so open about all the stories and experiences that you have shared with me and my listeners. So thank you. Thanks a lot.
It's been a pleasure, good to see. Thank you. And thanks, everyone.